She was reincarnated the day before her murder. What happened next? A young woman wakes up in her own bed, with the memory of being killed burned into her mind. She remembers the room. She remembers the weapon. She remembers the face of the person who did it. But the calendar says yesterday. She's alive. And she has only one day to change everything. At first she thinks she can just run, hide, avoid the danger. But every time she changes her path, someone else starts to fall into it. A quiet neighbor begins to fade. A kind stranger starts to unravel. And the future keeps reshaping itself, no matter what she does. Now she faces an impossible choice. Save herself, or give up her life to save someone who doesn't even know they're in danger. So what would you do if escaping your own death meant becoming someone else's miracle? Would you run, or would you stay and change fate forever? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Also, let us know in the comments what stories would you like us to write. About the first rays of dawn hadn't yet touched the Baltimore skyline when Seraphina Brooks jerked awake, her heart hammering against her ribs. The bedroom was quiet, too quiet after what she'd just experienced. Her hands flew to her chest, patting frantically, searching for wounds that should have been there. The memory was vivid, razor sharp, the cold bite of metal striking her body, the sickening thud as she fell, and those eyes, Adrian Cole's eyes, filled with a storm of rage and pain as he stood over her. "I died," she whispered into the darkness, her voice trembling. "I died last night." But here she was, breathing, whole, lying in her familiar bed with its soft purple comforter tangled around her legs. The street lamp outside cast familiar shadows through her curtains, just like it did every morning. Her phone lay on the nightstand, its screen dark and silent. With shaking fingers, Seraphina reached for the device. The screen lit up, harsh in the dim room, displaying yesterday's date. She blinked hard, but the numbers didn't change. Yesterday. Not today. Yesterday. A car horn blared on the street below, making her jump. The sound of morning traffic began filtering through her windows. The same sounds she'd heard yesterday morning. The same sounds she should never have heard again. The aroma of coffee drifted through her apartment walls. Mrs. Chen next door, right on schedule with her 5 a.m. brewing routine. Seraphina remembered smelling that same coffee yesterday, remembered thinking she should buy the same brand because it always smelled so good. Yesterday, today, the same day. Seraphina slid to the edge of her bed, wrapping her arms around herself. Her whole body shook as the memories continued to flood back, each one sharp and clear as crystal. The bedroom, not this peaceful morning bedroom, but the other one. Dark, cold, the fireplace poker gleaming dully in the shadows before it. "It happened," she whispered, needing to hear the words out loud. "I was there, in that room. Adrian Cole was there. A voice cracked. "He killed me." The morning light slowly strengthened, painting her walls with pale gold, but Seraphina couldn't stop shaking. She rocked back and forth, whispering the memory over and over, each detail precisely the same. The sound of the door opening, the flash of metal, the look in Adrian's eyes, not just anger, but something deeper, something broken. More traffic sounds rose from the street. Someone's car alarm chirped. A jogger's shoes slapped against the sidewalk. Normal morning sounds, everyday sounds, sounds she'd heard yesterday morning while getting ready for work. Work, where she'd first met Adrian Cole, where everything had started going wrong. Seraphina's normal routine flashed through her mind. Shower at 6:15, breakfast at 6:45, catch the 7:30 bus, walk into the office at 8 sharp, just as Adrian would be setting up his temporary workspace in the conference room. "No," she said firmly, her voice stronger now. "No, I'm not doing any of that. Not today." She had been given something impossible, a second chance, an extra day, a do-over of the worst day of her life. Her last day. The universe, or God, or whatever power had sent her back, had given her 24 precious hours to change her fate. And she knew, with absolute certainty, what she had to do. Stay away from Adrian Cole. Keep her distance. Don't let him see her. Don't let him know she exists. Don't give him any reason or opportunity to... Serafina shuddered, unable to complete the thought. The memory of those eyes, that metal, that darkness, it was too fresh, too real. Morning traffic continued to build outside her window. Soon the sidewalks would be full of commuters. Somewhere out there, Adrian Cole would be starting his day, having no idea that in another version of this same day, he would become a murderer. Serafina remained perched on the edge of her bed, watching the sun rise over Baltimore, her mind racing through possibilities. She could call in sick, leave town for the day, hide in her apartment until midnight. Past. Anything, everything to avoid the path that had led to that dark bedroom and that terrible ending. Mrs. Chen's coffee maker gurgled through the wall, finishing its brew cycle. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. The world was waking up, beginning a day it had already lived once before, though only Serafina knew that truth. She drew in a deep breath, then another. Her trembling slowly subsided as determination took its place. She had been given a precious gift, the knowledge of what was to come and the chance to change it. She would not waste it. The phone on her nightstand buzzed, her normal wake-up alarm. Serafina reached over and turned it off. No normal routine today. No familiar patterns. No Adrian Cole. She would live. She had to live. Whatever it took, this version of the day would end differently. Serafina pulled her light jacket tighter as she walked down an unfamiliar street. The morning air felt crisp against her face, autumn leaves crunching beneath her shoes. She'd chosen to walk the long way to Baltimore General, taking side streets she'd never bothered with before. Anything to avoid her usual bus route and the hospital's main entrance, where she knew Adrian Cole took his morning smoke breaks. Her heart thumped each time she rounded a corner, but the streets remained mercifully free of familiar faces. The walk took nearly an hour, but Serafina didn't mind. Every step that carried her away from her normal routine felt like a step away from danger. She entered through the hospital's rear entrance, using her badge to slip in through the service corridor. The basement-level hallway smelled of cleaning supplies and old linoleum, but Serafina breathed easier here than she would have at the main entrance. No cigarette smoke, no Adrian Cole. By the time she reached her desk in the billing department, her shoulders had begun to relax. Her computer screen showed 8:15, later than her usual start time, but still within acceptable limits. She logged in, pulled up her files, and slowly settled into her work routine. The morning passed quietly. No sign of Adrian Cole, no glimpse of him through the office windows, no mention of his IT project in the morning emails. With each passing hour, hope grew stronger in Serafina's chest. Maybe it would be this simple. Maybe just changing her route, staying out of sight, would be enough to prevent the horror she remembered. Around noon, a soft knock interrupted her concentration. An elderly woman stood in her doorway, clutching a stack of papers with trembling hands. Her grey hair was neatly styled, but her face showed clear distress. "I'm sorry to bother." "You!" the woman said, her voice wavering. "But I've been sent to 3 different offices already, and I just can't." She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Serafina rose immediately. "Please, come in. I'm happy to help." She gestured to the chair beside her desk. I'm Serafina Brooks. Lillian Morrow. The woman sank into the chair with visible relief. I've been trying to sort out these bills, but everything's so complicated. My insurance changed last month, and now nothing makes sense. Serafina gently took the crumpled papers, smoothing them on her desk. Let's look at these together. Sometimes having a second pair of eyes helps make things clearer. As she began explaining the forms to Lillian, movement in the hallway caught her attention. Marcus Delaney, one of the hospital's security guards, was pacing near the water cooler, his phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, Serafina could see the tension in his shoulders. What do you mean, denied? Marcus's voice, carried through the open door, sharp with anger. I submitted everything on time. Everything! He turned abruptly, and Serafina caught a glimpse of his face, flushed red, jaw clenched tight. She tried to focus on Lillian's paperwork, but found her attention drawn back to Marcus. Something about his agitation felt familiar, the same kind of pressure cooker tension she'd sensed in Adrian Cole before everything had gone wrong. Marcus's voice rose again. You can't do this to me. I need that approval today. He slammed his fist against the wall, making Lillian jump in her chair. It's all right, Serafina assured her quietly, though her own pulse had quickened. Let's look at this next section. But as she helped Lillian navigate her insurance forms, Serafina couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The morning's relief at avoiding Adrian Cole faded as she watched Marcus continue his angry pacing. The tension hadn't disappeared. It had just shifted, finding a new focal point in the agitated security guard. His phone call ended with another burst of angry words, and Marcus stormed past her office. His footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy with suppressed fury. Lillian shrank in her chair until he passed, then let out a shaky breath. Some people, she murmured. They carry such darkness with them. Serafina nodded slowly, her earlier sense of safety crumbling. She had thought changing her path would be enough to avoid disaster. Now, watching Marcus's retreating back, she realized it might not be that simple. The day's dangerous currents were still flowing. They had just found a different channel. A muffled thud and the crackle of paper echoed through the thin walls of Serafina's apartment. She paused, teacup halfway to her lips, and listened. Another sound followed, a soft, frustrated sigh and the rustle of shifting grocery bags. Setting her cup down, Serafina moved to her door and peered through the peephole. In the hallway, an elderly woman struggled to gather spilled items from a torn paper bag, her silver hair falling forward as she bent with difficulty. Serafina opened her door. Mrs. Whitcomb, let me help you with those. Eleanor Whitcomb straightened slowly, one hand pressed against the wall for support. Her face was lined with age, but her blue eyes still held a sharp clarity. Oh, I couldn't impose. It's no imposition at all, Serafina said, already gathering loose oranges and a box of tea that had rolled toward the stairs. The elderly woman's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her remaining grocery bag. You're the quiet one from downstairs, aren't you? Eleanor asked, watching as Serafina collected the scattered items. Always saying good morning in the hallway. That's right, I'm Serafina Brooks. She smiled warmly, cradling the armful of groceries. Would you like some help getting these inside? Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, dear. My fingers aren't what they used to be. She fumbled with her keys, eventually managing to unlock her apartment door. The interior was neat but sparse, with faded flowered wallpaper and furniture that had seen better days. Family photos lined one wall, though Serafina noticed they all seemed to be from many years ago. Eleanor moved slowly to the kitchen, setting down her bag with a soft grunt. Let me put these away for you. Serafina offered, placing the rescued groceries on the counter. Would you like to sit down? I should make us some tea, Eleanor said, since you've been so kind. That would be lovely. As Eleanor prepared the tea with practiced movements, Serafina quietly stored the groceries, noting the simple items, soup cans, bread, tea bags, and fruit. The kitchen was immaculately clean, but had an air of disuse, as if cooking for one had become more burden than pleasure. They settled in Eleanor's small living room, sunlight filtering through lace curtains. Eleanor's hands wrapped around her teacup, seeking its warmth. It's been a long while since I've had anyone up for tea, she admitted, her voice soft. I'm afraid I'm not much company these days. Sometimes quiet company is the best kind. Serafina replied gently. Eleanor's eyes drifted to a photograph on the side table, a young man with her same blue eyes, smiling broadly at the camera. That's my Thomas, she said, almost to herself. He'd be about your age now, I suppose. Serafina waited, sensing there was more Eleanor needed to say. The older woman stared into her tea, as if reading the leaves might reveal some hidden truth. I haven't seen him in 23 years. Eleanor continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Not since the night he left. I said such terrible things to him. Did everything wrong. Her hands trembled, tea threatening to spill. He wanted to be an artist, you see, had such talent. But I was scared. Scared he'd struggle, scared he'd fail. I pushed him to be practical, to follow his father into accounting. She shook her head slowly. I crushed his dreams with my fear, and he never forgave me for it. Serafina set her cup down and leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. You were trying to protect him. I was trying to control him, Eleanor corrected bitterly. And I lost him because of it. I ruined his life with my interference. Mrs. Whitcomb, Serafina said softly, being afraid for someone you love doesn't make you a bad mother. It makes you human. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. I've written him so many letters over the years. Never sent them, of course. Wouldn't know where to send them now. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that his happiness meant more than my fear. Serafina reached across and took Eleanor's hand. The older woman's fingers were cool and fragile in her warm grip. It's never too late for healing, Mrs. Whitcomb. Never too late for forgiveness, including forgiving yourself. How can I? Eleanor's voice cracked. When I don't even know if he's happy, if he ever followed his dreams, if he has children I'll never meet? Because holding on to this pain isn't helping him, and it's hurting you. Serafina said gently. You made a mistake out of love, a human mistake. You've carried this regret for 23 years. Perhaps it's time to set it down. Eleanor's shoulders shook as silent tears fell. Serafina moved to sit beside her on the couch, offering quiet comfort as years of held-back grief finally found release. They sat together as the afternoon light shifted, the only sounds Eleanor's soft weeping and the gentle tick of an old clock on the mantel. Finally, Eleanor straightened, wiping her eyes. I haven't cried like that in years, she admitted, attempting a wobbly smile. You must think me a silly old woman. I think you're a mother who loves her son, Serafina corrected kindly. And I think love is never silly. Eleanor studied her face for a long moment. You have a gift, dear, for seeing into hearts, for knowing just what they need. Serafina felt something shift in the air between them, a lightening, as if a heavy cloud had begun to disperse. The afternoon sun seemed brighter somehow, gilding the edges of the family photos on the wall with gentle light. Would you? Eleanor hesitated, then pressed on. Would you like to see some of Thomas's drawings? I kept them all. I'd love to. Serafina said warmly. As Eleanor rose to fetch an old portfolio from a cabinet, Serafina felt it again. That sense of something unseen changing, healing, like a knot slowly becoming untangled, or a door long rusted beginning to ease open. She watched Eleanor's face soften as she handled her son's artwork, sharing stories of the boy who loved to draw, and knew that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could set the most profound changes in motion. Serafina stepped through the hospital's sliding glass doors, her mind still lingering on her conversation with Eleanor. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the sterile hallway floors. Her comfortable shoes squeaked against the polished tiles as she made her way to the nurse's station. Before she even rounded the corner, she heard raised voices. Her steps slowed as she recognized Marcus Delaney's tense tone bouncing off the walls. "I've checked everywhere. That file needs to be found now." Marcus's voice cracked with frustration. "Mr. Delaney, I understand your concern, but raising your voice isn't helping." That was Vivian Porter, her usual crisp efficiency now tinged with irritation. Serafina paused at the edge of the nurse's station. Marcus stood with his hands planted firmly on the desk, leaning forward. His security guard uniform looked unusually wrinkled, and a slight sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. Vivian stood her ground on the other side, arms crossed, her neat bun starting to come loose after what had clearly been a stressful day. "It's my job to maintain security protocols," Marcus insisted, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the desk. "Missing patient files are a serious breach." "And it's my job to manage this department," Vivian shot back. "I've already told you we're doing everything we can to locate it." Serafina watched as other staff members scurried past, keeping their heads down. The tension in the air felt thick enough to cut with a knife. She noticed how Marcus's jaw clenched and unclenched, how his shoulders hunched forward like a spring wound too tight. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Hi, Marcus, Vivian. Can I help?" Both turned to look at her. Marcus's expression flickered between anger and embarrassment, while Vivian's professional mask showed signs of cracking. "It's fine," Vivian said quickly. "We're just having a minor disagreement about a missing file for patient Rodriguez." Marcus cut in. "It should have been logged an hour ago." Serafina nodded thoughtfully. "Rodriguez, I think I might have seen that file earlier. Would you mind if I took a look?" She moved to the filing cabinet, her movements deliberately slow and calm. The sound of her sorting through folders filled the tense silence. She could feel Marcus shifting his weight from foot to foot behind her. "Sometimes," she said conversationally, "when I'm looking for something important, being worried about finding it actually makes it harder to see what's right in front of me. Like when you're rushing to leave for work and can't find your keys, only to realize they were in your hand the whole time." She heard Marcus let out a small huff that might have been almost like a laugh. The rigid set of his shoulders loosened, just slightly. "Here we go," Serafina said, pulling out a blue folder. It was filed under R instead of the patient's first name. An easy mistake to make during a busy shift. Marcus stepped forward to take the file, his movements less aggressive. "Now. Thank you. I should have looked there first." "We all miss things sometimes," Serafina said gently, "especially when we're stressed about other things." Marcus's eyes met hers for a moment, and she saw something vulnerable flash across his face. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I got a call earlier. My kid's having trouble at school. I guess I've been on edge." Vivian's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything we can do to help?" Marcus shook his head, then straightened his uniform. "No, but I'm sorry I got worked up. It wasn't professional." "We're all human," Serafina said with a warm smile. Sometimes we just need to take a breath and remember we're all on the same team. The tension in the air dissolved like sugar in warm water. Vivian stepped forward and held out her hand for the file. I'll make sure this gets properly logged right away. And Marcus, if you ever need to talk about your kid, my door is always open. I used to be a school counselor, before switching to hospital administration. Marcus's eyes widened slightly in surprise. I didn't know that. Thanks, I might take you up on that. As Marcus walked away, his steps lighter and his posture more relaxed, Serafina felt a sudden wave of understanding wash over her. The morning's conversation with Eleanor, this moment with Marcus, they weren't random events. Each small act of kindness, each moment of understanding seemed to be healing something larger than the immediate situation. She watched as Vivian efficiently logged the file, humming softly to herself now. The afternoon sun caught the edges of the papers, turning them golden. Around them, the regular rhythm of hospital life continued. Phones ringing, nurses chatting, wheels squeaking on linoleum floors. Serafina felt a profound sense of clarity settling in her chest. Maybe the answer wasn't in running away from what was coming. Maybe it was in these small moments, these tiny choices to choose compassion over fear, understanding over anger. Each gentle word and kind action seemed to shift something in the air, like ripples spreading across still water. She thought about how differently the situation might have escalated if she hadn't stepped in, if Marcus's frustration had continued to build, if Vivian's patience had snapped. Instead, a potential explosion had been transformed into a moment of connection. As she settled in at her desk to begin her afternoon tasks, Serafina felt herself beginning to understand. The timeline she had woken up in wasn't a prison to escape from. It was a chance to heal whatever had gone wrong. Each interaction was an opportunity to mend the invisible threads that connected them all. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the hospital windows as Serafina made her final rounds. Her heart had been racing all day, counting down the hours, wondering if her small acts of kindness had been enough to change what was meant to happen. As she walked past the main entrance, she noticed Adrian Cole standing in his usual smoking spot. Her breath caught for a moment, but something was different. Adrian was chatting with another maintenance worker, his face relaxed and open. He was even smiling, something Serafina had never seen before. When he caught her eye, he gave a casual nod, nothing like the dark, intense stare she remembered from her other timeline. "Have a good evening, Ms. Brooks," Adrian called out, crushing his cigarette under his boot. "You too," she managed to reply, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. Near the security desk, Marcus Delaney was gathering his things to leave for the day. The tightness that had been in his shoulders earlier was gone. He was humming softly as he signed out, exchanging pleasant goodbyes with the evening shift guard. "Thanks again for earlier," Marcus said as Serafina passed. "Sometimes I let little things get to me more than they should." "We all have those days," Serafina replied, warmly. "What matters is how we handle them." Marcus smiled and headed for the exit, his footsteps light and unburdened. Serafina watched him go, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. The powder keg of emotions she'd sensed earlier had been completely diffused. Walking home in the cool evening air, Serafina felt hope blooming in her chest. The memory of her death still felt real, but now it seemed more like a warning than a prophecy. Small kindnesses, she was learning, could ripple outward in powerful ways. In her apartment, she moved around her small kitchen, assembling a simple dinner of pasta with fresh vegetables. The familiar motions were comforting: chopping, stirring, the gentle bubbling of boiling water. She had just sat down to eat when she heard a heavy thud in the hallway outside. Serafina froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Then came a weak cry that made her blood run cold. She rushed to her door and threw it open. Eleanor Whitcomb was crumpled on the floor near her own apartment, one hand pressed against her chest, her face grey and twisted with pain. "Eleanor!" Serafina dropped to her knees beside the elderly woman. "What's wrong? Where does it hurt?" "Can't breathe." Eleanor gasped. Her fingers clutched at Serafina's sleeve. "My chest." Serafina pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "I need an ambulance," she said clearly, forcing herself to stay calm. "Elderly woman with severe chest pain and difficulty breathing." She quickly gave the address and apartment number. While they waited, Serafina held Eleanor's hand, speaking softly to keep her conscious. "Help is coming. Just stay with me. Keep breathing. That's it. Nice and slow." Eleanor's eyes were wide with fear. "I don't want to die alone," she whispered. "You're not alone," Serafina assured her, squeezing her hand. "I'm right here with you, and I'm not going anywhere." The paramedics arrived quickly, their efficient movements filling the narrow hallway. As they loaded Eleanor onto the stretcher, Serafina spoke up. "I'm riding with her to the hospital." In the ambulance, Serafina watched as the paramedics worked, attaching monitors and starting an IV. Eleanor's face was partially hidden behind an oxygen mask, but her eyes remained fixed on Serafina, drawing strength from her presence. The emergency room was a blur of activity. Serafina found herself pushed to the sidelines as doctors and nurses swarmed around Eleanor. She paced in the waiting room, her dinner long forgotten, praying that the strange second chance she'd been given hadn't simply shifted tragedy from one person to another. Hours passed. The waiting room slowly emptied as other families received news about their loved ones. Finally, a tired-looking doctor approached her. "Are you here for Mrs. Whitcomb?" Serafina nodded, her throat tight. "She's in critical condition," the doctor said gently. "She's experienced a severe cardiac event. The next 24 hours will be crucial. We're doing everything we can, but given her age and the severity of the attack—" He paused, his expression grave. "You should prepare yourself for the possibility that she may not recover." Serafina sank into a nearby chair, her legs suddenly weak. The hope she'd felt earlier seemed to crumble away. She'd been so focused on preventing one death that she hadn't seen another coming. Eleanor's frightened words echoed in her mind. "I don't want to die alone." "Can I see her?" she asked. The doctor nodded. "She's being moved to the ICU. A nurse will come get you when she's settled." Serafina sat in the harsh, fluorescent light of the waiting room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The clock on the wall ticked steadily forward, each second bringing them closer to whatever tomorrow would bring. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the dim hospital room as Serafina sat beside Eleanor's bed, gently holding the elderly woman's frail hand. The skin felt paper-thin beneath her fingers, delicate veins visible in the harsh fluorescent light that spilled in from the hallway. Outside the private room, nurses hurried past with quiet footsteps and hushed voices, their shadows dancing across the floor. "I'm right here, Eleanor," Serafina whispered, her thumb moving in small circles over Eleanor's knuckles. "I'm not going anywhere." The doctors had worked frantically when they'd first arrived, calling out medical terms and numbers that made Serafina's head spin. Now the urgency had settled into a tense waiting game. Eleanor's face looked peaceful, despite the oxygen mask and the tangle of monitoring wires. Too peaceful, like she'd already begun drifting away. Serafina's chest tightened as realization washed over her. This was the same room, the same late hour, where her own story had ended in that other timeline, where Adrian Cole had... She pushed the memory away, focusing instead on Eleanor's shallow breathing. "This isn't right," she murmured, blinking back tears. "It was supposed to be me. I was the one who..." Her voice cracked. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. She'd spent the day healing emotional wounds, preventing violence, only to have death find a different target. A nurse poked her head in, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Brooks, visiting hours ended a while ago, but given the circumstances, you're welcome to stay. Just try to get some rest yourself, okay? There's a recliner in the corner." Serafina nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I promised her she wouldn't be alone." After the nurse left, Serafina scooted her chair closer to the bed. The recliner could wait. Right now, maintaining physical contact with Eleanor felt crucial, as if Serafina's touch might somehow anchor the older woman to this world. "You know," she said softly, "when we had tea this afternoon, I could tell how much pain you carry about your son. But Eleanor, you have so much love to give. I saw it in the way you arranged. Those little cookies on the plate, how carefully you poured the tea, in how you remembered I mentioned liking honey instead of sugar last time." She squeezed Eleanor's hand. "You're not done sharing that love yet. You have more healing to do, both giving and receiving it." The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat. Serafina closed her eyes, remembering the quiet strength she'd sensed in Eleanor during their conversation. Behind the guilt and regret, there was still a spark of hope, a desire to make things right. "Please," Serafina prayed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't take her yet. She needs more time. Her story isn't finished." She opened her eyes, watching Eleanor's chest rise and fall. "I know I was given a second chance today. If I could, I'd give it to her instead." Hours crept by. Serafina's back ached from sitting in the hard chair, but she refused to move away. She talked softly to Eleanor about small things, the changing leaves, outside her apartment window, the kind barista who always remembered her order, the little girl who had hugged her leg in thanks at the hospital that morning. Around 3 a.m, one of the doctors came in to check Eleanor's vitals. His expression lightened slightly as he made notes on her chart. "Her numbers are looking a bit better," he said quietly. "Blood pressure's stabilizing. She's not out of danger yet, but it's a positive sign." Serafina felt tears of relief slip down her cheeks. "Thank you, Doctor." When they were alone again, she leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "Did you hear that? You're fighting. I knew you would. You're stronger than you know." She settled back in her chair, still holding Eleanor's hand, watching the numbers on the monitors with newfound hope. The danger hadn't passed, but Eleanor was showing the same quiet resilience that had helped her survive decades of regret and loneliness. Dawn began to creep into the room, painting the walls in soft greys and pinks. Eleanor's breathing remained shallow but steady, her face relaxed in sleep. Serafina felt exhausted but deeply present, aware of each moment as it passed. She had started this day knowing she was meant to die, and now she sat watching over someone else's battle between life and death. A young nurse came in to adjust Eleanor's IV, her movements gentle and practiced. She smiled kindly at Serafina. "You're a good friend, staying with her like this." "She's been alone too long," Serafina replied simply, her voice hoarse from the long night. When the nurse left, Serafina carefully shifted her position to ease her stiff muscles, but kept her hand firmly wrapped around Eleanor's. The morning light grew stronger, but uncertainty still hung heavy in the air. Eleanor had stabilized somewhat, but her condition remained critical. Each beep of the heart monitor was both a victory and a reminder of how precarious the situation remained. Serafina leaned forward, resting her free hand lightly on Eleanor's arm. "I'm still here," she whispered, "and I'll stay right here as long as you need me. You're not alone anymore, Eleanor. Not now, not ever again." The promise felt solid and true in her heart, extending far beyond this hospital room and this critical night. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor cast long shadows as Serafina walked slowly through the quiet halls. At this late hour, the usual bustling activity had settled into a gentle hum of monitors and the soft footsteps of night shift nurses. She passed the nurses' station where earlier that day she had helped Marcus Delaney find the missing file. The desk was empty now, but the memory of his relieved smile lingered. Serafina paused by a window, watching the city lights twinkle against the dark sky. Her mind wandered back through the events of the day, each small moment of kindness like stepping stones leading her here. She thought of Lillian Morrow's trembling hands, steadying as Serafina helped her with the paperwork. The way Marcus's tense shoulders had relaxed when she stepped in to help, diffusing his anger before it could ignite. Even Adrian Cole, who had been the source of such terror in her memories of tomorrow, had seemed transformed by the ripples of compassion flowing through the hospital. "It's like a river changing course," she whispered to herself, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Every kind word, every gentle action redirected the flow of pain. But rivers, she knew, always had to reach the sea. The timeline still demanded its ending, not with violence now, but with the quiet dignity of natural closure. Her heart ached as she understood that by preventing one death, she hadn't eliminated death entirely. She had only changed its nature, transformed it from an act of violence into something more peaceful, more meaningful perhaps. Serafina turned away from the window and made her way back to Eleanor's room. The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat. Eleanor lay still, her silver hair spread across the pillow, her face lined with years of carried guilt. In the dim light, she looked smaller, more fragile than the woman who had shared tea and secrets just hours ago. Taking her seat beside the bed, Serafina gently took Eleanor's hand in hers. The skin was paper-thin, cool to the touch, mapped with blue veins that had carried decades of love and regret. She thought of Eleanor's confession about her son, the weight of those years pressing down on a mother's heart. "Eleanor," Serafina said softly, her voice barely above a whisper in the quiet room. "I need you to hear something important." She squeezed the frail hand gently, watching Eleanor's face for any sign of awareness. "You've carried your regrets for so long, like stones in your pockets, weighing you down with every step. But it's time to let them go." A slight flutter of Eleanor's eyelids encouraged Serafina to continue. "The love you had for your son, it was real. The mistakes you made don't erase that love. They just make you human, like all of us." Her voice grew stronger, filled with certainty. "You are forgiven, Eleanor, for every harsh word spoken in anger, for every moment you wish you could take back, for every choice you would make differently now. You are forgiven." Tears began to slip from beneath Eleanor's closed eyelids, tracking slowly down her temples. Serafina reached out with her free hand to wipe them gently away. "Your heart has been heavy with this burden for so many years, but you don't have to carry it anymore. Let it go. Rest in the knowledge that you are forgiven, truly and completely." Eleanor's lips trembled, and her fingers tightened slightly around Serafina's hand. More tears fell, but these seemed different. Not the bitter tears of regret, but the cleansing tears of release. Her breathing, which had been shallow and labored, began to even out into a smoother rhythm. "That's it," Serafina murmured, continuing to stroke Eleanor's hand. "Let peace find you now. You've walked such a long road carrying this weight. But you can rest now. Just rest." The monitors continued their steady rhythm as Eleanor's tears gradually slowed. Her face, which had been tight with pain and regret for so long, began to relax. The deep lines around her mouth softened, and her breathing became deeper, more peaceful. Serafina sat in companionable silence, maintaining her gentle hold on Eleanor's hand. She watched as sleep began to settle over the older woman like a soft blanket, bringing with it the peace that had eluded her for so many years. There was something beautiful in this moment, something sacred in witnessing the unburdening of a soul. The night deepened around them, but Serafina remained steady in her vigil. Eleanor's sleep grew deeper, more restful, her face now bearing an expression of tranquility that hadn't been there before. The tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving behind trails that caught the dim light, evidence of the healing that had taken place in this quiet room. In this peaceful moment, Serafina understood that sometimes the greatest act of love was simply being present, holding space for another's pain until it could transform into peace. She watched over Eleanor's sleeping form, guardian of this sacred transition from burden to release, from regret to forgiveness, from wakefulness to peaceful rest. The clock on Serafina's wall ticked steadily toward 11 as she unlocked her apartment door. The familiar space felt different now, both comforting and somehow distant, like a photograph of a place once called home. She flicked on the lights and stood for a moment in the entryway, taking in the quiet rooms that had sheltered her simple life. Moving with deliberate care, she gathered a small bag and began filling it with essential items. A change of clothes, her toothbrush, the worn prayer book her grandmother had given her. Her fingers lingered on each object, acknowledging its place in her story. At her desk, Serafina pulled out paper and pen. The letter to her landlord needed to be practical, but she found herself pausing between sentences, considering how to explain what couldn't really be explained. "Dear Mr. Peterson," she wrote, "I need to terminate my lease unexpectedly. Please use my security deposit for the final month's rent. I've left the apartment in good condition." She sealed the envelope and placed it on the kitchen counter where it would be easily found. Then she began to clean, moving from room to room with careful attention. She wiped down counters until they gleamed, swept floors, straightened pictures on walls. It wasn't just tidying, it was a way of saying goodbye, of leaving things better than she'd found them. In her bedroom, she made the bed with hospital corners, smoothing every wrinkle from the pale blue comforter. The morning's rumpled sheets seemed from another lifetime. When she'd awakened with the memory of death fresh in her mind, now as she tucked and straightened, she felt an odd sense of peace. Serafina opened her closet and smiled at the neat rows of practical clothes, her nurse's scrubs, comfortable sweaters, the dress she'd worn to her college graduation. She touched them gently, like saying goodbye to old friends. Each item held memories, long shifts at the hospital, quiet evenings with a book, walks in the park on rare days off. In the bathroom, she cleaned everything thoroughly, then packed her few toiletries. The medicine cabinet held basic supplies, aspirin, Band-Aids, cold medicine. She left them all in place. Someone else might need them someday. The kitchen took the most time. She emptied the refrigerator of anything that would spoil, wiped down shelves, and arranged the remaining non-perishables neatly in the cupboards. The dishes were washed, dried, and returned to their places. She wrote a note offering her small collection of potted herbs to Mrs. Martinez next door, who had always admired them. As she worked, memories floated through her mind like autumn leaves, the day she'd moved in, proud to have her first place of her own. The countless quiet mornings with coffee by the window, watching the city wake up. The evening she'd first heard Eleanor dropping groceries in the hallway above, leading to their friendship. Eleanor. The thought of her brought Serafina's hands to a pause as she was arranging books on the shelf. The elderly woman's face appeared in her mind, lined with years of regret, but softening with hope during their conversations. Eleanor, who had lived so long with the weight of guilt over her son. Eleanor, who was now lying in a hospital bed, unknowingly taking on a fate meant for someone else. Serafina glanced at the clock. 11:45. Time was moving forward with the same steady rhythm it always had, but tonight each minute felt precious and purposeful. She took one last look around the apartment, clean, ordered, ready for whatever came next. Then she shouldered her small bag and turned out the lights. The night air was cool as she walked to her car. The streets were quiet now, most windows dark. A few late-night workers hurried past, wrapped in their own concerns. None of them knew that this ordinary night was anything but ordinary. The drive to the hospital took only minutes at this hour. Serafina parked in the familiar lot where she'd left her car countless times before. But tonight was different. Tonight she wasn't arriving for a shift or even to visit a patient. Tonight she was arriving to make things right. The hospital's automatic doors whispered open as she approached. The night shift staff nodded to her, a familiar face, even at this unusual hour. The fluorescent lights cast their unchanging glow over the corridors as she made her way to Eleanor's room. She didn't feel tired. Though she'd been awake for what seemed like days, her mind was clear, her purpose certain. Each step along the polished floor brought her closer to a decision she'd already made in her heart. Eleanor's room was dim and quiet, except for the steady beeping of monitors. The elderly woman's face looked peaceful in sleep, the worry lines smoothed away. Serafina set her bag down and took her usual place in the chair beside the bed. She reached for Eleanor's hand, warm and soft against her own. "You've carried enough weight," she whispered. "It's time to let go of the guilt, time to live." Outside the window, the city lights twinkled like earthbound stars. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded. The normal sounds of a hospital at night drifted in from the hallway. Quiet conversations, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes, the gentle rolling of carts. Serafina sat straight in her chair, alert and ready. She wouldn't rest, not tonight. Not when there was still work to be done. The timeline, she had learned, demanded balance. If violence had been prevented, if hatred had been turned aside, then the scales still needed to be set right. But it would be done with love this time, with choice rather than fear. She watched the clock tick toward midnight, each moment precious and full of meaning. Eleanor's breathing remained steady, her vital signs stable. The night shift nurses came and went, checking readings, adjusting equipment. Serafina acknowledged them with quiet nods but remained focused on her vigil. In these last minutes before midnight, she felt the rightness of her choice settle over her like a mantle. The day's work, each small kindness, each moment of peace, had created ripples of healing. She wouldn't let those ripples be erased by allowing harm to come to Eleanor. The time had come to complete the circle, to accept what had been meant for her in the first place. The sterile hospital hallway felt different in these quiet, midnight hours. Serafina Brooks walked slowly past the nurse's station, her footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows that danced along the walls, and somewhere in the distance, a monitor beeped steadily. She paused when she noticed the small chapel door was open, warm light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Thomas Kincaid, the hospital chaplain, sat quietly in one of the wooden pews. His silver hair caught the glow of the electric candles, and his weathered hands were folded peacefully in his lap. He looked up as Serafina appeared in the doorway, offering a gentle smile that reached his kind eyes. "Come in," he said softly. "You look like you could use a moment of peace." Serafina stepped inside, letting the chapel's hushed atmosphere envelop her. The room was simple, just a few rows of wooden pews, a small altar, and those flickering electric candles. But there was something comforting about its simplicity. "I'm afraid," she admitted, sliding into the pew beside Thomas. Not of what might happen exactly, more afraid that I'm not strong enough for what I need to do. Thomas turned slightly to face her, his movements unhurried. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in fighting or running away, he said. Sometimes it's in staying still and accepting what love asks of us. Serafina's hands twisted in her lap. How do you know when it's right to give something up? To let go of everything? That's a deep question for midnight. Thomas replied, but his tone was warm. In my experience, when love guides our choices, we feel a certain peace even in the midst of fear, like standing in the eye of a storm. Everything around us might be chaos, but there's a quiet center where we know we're doing what's right. Tears welled in Serafina's eyes. I met someone today. Well, I've known her a while, but I really met her today. Eleanor Whitcomb. She's carried so much pain for so long, thinking she failed as a mother. And now, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Now she might die believing that. Thomas nodded slowly. And you want to prevent that? Yes, but it means... Serafina's voice caught. It means giving up everything I thought I wanted, everything I planned. You know, Thomas said thoughtfully, I've sat with many people in their final moments, and I've noticed something interesting. Those who lived for themselves often die with regret, but those who lived for others seem to face the end with a strange kind of joy, as if they've discovered some secret about what makes life meaningful. Serafina looked at the electric candles, their artificial flames steady and unwavering. I always thought I was supposed to help people by being there for them, by listening and caring. I never thought helping might mean leaving. Thomas finished gently. Love takes many forms. Sometimes it's staying present, and sometimes it's stepping aside so someone else can heal. Sometimes it's fighting to survive, and sometimes... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes it's surrendering what we hold most dear. A nurse walked past the chapel, her shoes squeaking slightly on the floor. Serafina waited until the sound faded before speaking again. I'm not special, she whispered. I'm just me. How can I know if I'm making the right choice? Thomas's eyes crinkled with understanding. The fact that you're sitting here, wrestling with this decision, tells me you already know what's right. You're just looking for the courage to do it. But what if I'm wrong? What if there's another way? There usually are other ways, Thomas acknowledged. But I've found that when we're faced with choices like this, our heart recognizes the path that aligns with love, even when it's the hardest path, even when it costs us everything. Serafina sat quietly for a moment, letting his words sink in. The chapel's silence felt different now, less heavy, more purposeful. She thought about Eleanor upstairs, about the weight of regret that had lined the older woman's face. She thought about how one act of violence could ripple through time, touching lives in ways no one could predict. I've spent my whole life trying not to be noticed, she said softly, trying to stay safe. But maybe that's not what I'm here for. Thomas reached over and patted her hand. Safety isn't always the highest good. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from being willing to be vulnerable, to take risks for the sake of love. How do you face something like that without being afraid? Oh, you'll be afraid, Thomas said with a quiet chuckle. Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about feeling it and moving forward anyway, because love is stronger than fear. Serafina took a deep breath, feeling something settle in her chest. The fear was still there, but it felt different now, more like a companion than an enemy. Thank you, she said, standing slowly. I think I understand now. Thomas stood as well, his movements careful and deliberate. Whatever you're facing, remember this. love given freely, even at great cost, is never wasted. It changes things in ways we can't always see. Serafina nodded, feeling tears rise again, but also feeling a strange sense of peace. She turned toward the chapel door, then paused. Will you look after Eleanor? Of course. Thomas promised softly. She won't be alone. With a final grateful smile, Serafina left the chapel and walked toward the elevator. Each step felt purposeful now, guided by something larger than fear or self-preservation. As she made her way back to Eleanor's room, she felt a calm determination settle over her, like a warm blanket on a cold night. Eleanor was sleeping peacefully when Serafina entered the room, the monitors showing stable, vital signs. Serafina settled into the chair beside the bed, reaching out to hold Eleanor's hand. In the quiet of the hospital room, with the night stretching out before her, she felt more certain than she ever had before. The fear wasn't gone, but it had transformed into something else, something that felt almost like love. The gentle beeping of medical monitors filled the quiet hospital room as pre-dawn light began to creep through the blinds. Eleanor Whitcomb's breathing had grown steadier over the past hour, her chest rising and falling in a more natural rhythm. Serafina Brooks sat in the vinyl chair beside the bed, her hand still resting lightly on Eleanor's arm, offering silent comfort through the long night. Dr. Chen entered the room, his footsteps soft on the linoleum floor. He checked Eleanor's vital signs and made notes on his tablet, his expression thoughtful. Her blood pressure has stabilized, he said quietly to Serafina, and her heart rhythm is much stronger than it was earlier. Hope flickered in Serafina's chest. Really? That's wonderful news. The doctor nodded, allowing a small smile. We'll need to run more tests, of course, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Whatever crisis she was heading toward seems to have passed. He patted Eleanor's hand. She's quite a fighter. Serafina felt tears of relief prick at her eyes. Yes, she is. Her voice came out raspier than usual, and she cleared her throat. As Dr. Chen left the room, Serafina noticed her hands were trembling slightly. She pressed them together in her lap, trying to still the shake. A wave of dizziness washed over her, making the room tilt strangely. She closed her eyes and took several deep breaths until the sensation passed. When she opened them again, Eleanor was watching her through half-lidded eyes. You look pale, dear, Eleanor whispered. Serafina forced a smile. I'm fine, just tired. How are you feeling? Better, I think. Eleanor's voice was weak but clear. Though I gave everyone quite a scare, didn't I? You did, Serafina agreed, swallowing against an odd tightness in her throat. But the doctor says you're improving. Eleanor studied her face with surprising intensity for someone who'd been critically ill just hours before. You've been here all night, haven't you? Of course. Serafina tried to sit up straighter, fighting another wave of dizziness. Her limbs felt strangely heavy, as if she'd run a marathon. Such a kind soul, Eleanor murmured, like an angel watching over me. Serafina's vision blurred momentarily, and she blinked hard to clear it. The weakness spreading through her body was becoming harder to ignore, but she kept her voice steady. I just wanted to make sure you weren't alone. A nurse came in to check Eleanor's vitals, seeming pleased with what she found. Your numbers are looking much better, Mrs. Whitcomb. I think you gave your guardian angel here quite a workout last night, but you're on the mend now. Serafina felt a strange flutter in her chest at the nurse's choice of words. She pressed a hand there, trying to calm the sensation. The morning sun was beginning to stream, through the window more strongly now, painting golden stripes across the hospital bed. Would you like some water? She asked Eleanor, partly to distract herself from the increasing weakness in her limbs. Yes, please. Eleanor's voice was growing stronger. Serafina stood carefully, steadying herself against the bed rail as another spell of dizziness swept through her. She poured a cup of water from the pitcher on the bedside table, her hands shaking enough that a few drops splashed onto the surface. "Are you sure you're all right?" Eleanor asked as Serafina helped her take a few sips. "You're trembling." "Just tired," Serafina repeated, easing back into her chair. "It's been a long night." The sunrise was filling the room now, streaming through the windows in bright rays that seemed to make the very air glow. Serafina felt oddly disconnected from her body, as if she were floating slightly above herself. Her skin tingled with a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. She watched Eleanor's face in the morning light, noting how much better her color looked, how much more peaceful her expression was. The older woman's eyes were growing heavy again, but this time it seemed like normal, healing sleep rather than the dangerous unconsciousness of the night before. "Rest now," Serafina whispered, even as she felt her own energy continuing to drain away. "Everything's going to be all right." Eleanor's fingers found hers and squeezed weakly. "Thank you," she murmured, drifting off to sleep. Serafina sat very still, focusing on breathing through the waves of dizziness and weakness that kept washing over her. The sunrise painted the room in ever-brightening shades of gold, and she found herself mesmerized by the way the light played across the walls and floor. Her body felt increasingly distant, but her mind was filled with a strange clarity. She thought about the past 24 hours, how a simple change in routine had sparked a chain of events that led here, to this moment. How choosing kindness over fear had somehow altered the course of multiple lives. The morning sun streamed through the windows, warming her face even as she felt a deep chill settling into her bones. "Thank you," Eleanor mumbled again in her sleep, her hand still loosely holding Serafina's. Serafina couldn't find the strength to respond, but she managed to give Eleanor's fingers a gentle squeeze. The sunlight filled the room completely now, so bright it was almost hard to look at. Serafina's vision swam, but she kept her focus on Eleanor's peaceful face, drawing comfort from the steady rise and fall of the older woman's chest. Through the windows, the new day was dawning in earnest, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of pink and gold. Serafina sat very still in her chair, holding Eleanor's hand as morning light flooded the room, turning everything it touched to pure, radiant gold. The morning sun painted Baltimore streets in gentle shades of gold as Serafina Brooks stepped out of the hospital. Her legs felt unusually heavy, as if she had just run a marathon, but her heart was filled with a tranquility she had never known before. She paused for a moment, letting the warm rays caress her face, watching early commuters hurry past with their coffee cups and briefcases. "One step at a time," she whispered to herself, beginning her journey home at a measured pace. The familiar streets looked different today, more vibrant, more alive. Every detail seemed to stand out with crystal clarity. The way dewdrops sparkled on flower petals in window boxes, the cheerful chirping of sparrows, even the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Serafina's usual 15-minute walk stretched into 30 as she stopped frequently to catch her breath, but she didn't mind. Each pause gave her another moment to soak in the beauty of the ordinary world around her. As she rounded the corner onto Market Street, the sweet aroma of fresh-baked bread and warm butter drew her attention to Mrs. Chen's bakery. Through the large front window, she could see trays of golden croissants and plump muffins being arranged in neat rows. A small bell tinkled as she pushed open the door. "Good morning, dear," Mrs. Chen called out from behind the counter, her round face creased with a warm smile. "You're out early today." Serafina nodded, leaning slightly against the glass display case. "I'd like to get some treats for my neighbors, please." Her eyes roamed over the selection. Cinnamon rolls dripping with icing, blueberry scones dusted with sugar, apple turnovers still warm from the oven. She chose carefully. A chocolate croissant for Mr. Patterson in 2B, who always helped carry out everyone's recycling, lemon bars for the young couple in 3A who had just had their first baby, and for Eleanor's apartment, a perfectly flaky apple turnover. "Would you like anything for yourself?" Mrs. Chen asked, boxing up the selections. Serafina shook her head with a gentle smile. "No, thank you. These are enough." The walk home felt longer than usual, but Serafina didn't rush. She watched a mother helping her young daughter learn to ride a bike, training wheels rattling against the sidewalk. An elderly man walked his golden retriever, stopping to let the dog sniff every fire hydrant. 2 construction workers shared their thermos of coffee, laughing at some private joke. Each moment felt precious, like a photograph she wanted to preserve in her memory. At her apartment building, she climbed the stairs slowly, pausing on each landing to catch her breath. She delivered each pastry with care, leaving the lemon bars with a congratulatory note for the new parents, handling the chocolate croissant to a delighted Mr. Patterson, and finally standing before Eleanor's door. Serafina ran her fingers along the wood grain of Eleanor's door, remembering their conversation over tea just yesterday, though it felt like a lifetime ago. She placed the apple turnover in a small paper bag with a handwritten note. "Welcome home. You are loved." Then she carefully propped it against the door, where Eleanor would find it upon her return from the hospital. Inside her own apartment, the morning light streamed through her curtains, creating patterns on the hardwood floor. Everything was exactly as she had left it, yet somehow different. Her small space felt both familiar and new, like seeing an old friend after many years apart. Serafina moved through her morning routine with deliberate slowness. She filled her kettle but didn't turn it on. She straightened the magazines on her coffee table, adjusted the throw pillows on her couch, and opened the window to let in the fresh morning air. Finally, she made her way to her bedroom. The bed was still neatly made from yesterday morning, the blue cotton sheets smooth and inviting. She sat on the edge, running her hand over the soft fabric. The fatigue she'd been fighting seemed to settle deeper into her bones, but it wasn't an uncomfortable feeling, more like the satisfied exhaustion after completing an important task. Serafina lay down carefully, not bothering to change her clothes or pull back the covers. The morning sun warmed her face through the window, and she could hear the distant sounds of the city beginning its day. Car horns, children's laughter, the rumble of garbage trucks. Her breathing slowed, matching the peaceful rhythm of the world around her. As she rested on her bed, Serafina felt the events of the past 24 hours settle over her like a comfortable blanket. The fear and confusion of yesterday morning seemed far away now, replaced by a deep sense of rightness. She had done what needed to be done, shown kindness where it was needed, and brought healing where there might have been harm. Her eyes grew heavy as she listened to the gentle ticking of her bedside clock and the soft rustle of leaves outside her window. The morning light continued to fill her room with warmth as Serafina allowed herself to rest, knowing that sometimes the most profound acts of love come not in grand gestures, but in simple choices made with an open heart. The afternoon sun streamed through Serafina's bedroom window, casting warm, golden light across her face. Her eyes fluttered open slowly, and for a moment she lay still, taking in the peaceful quiet of her apartment. The events of the past day, or rather the past 2 versions of the same day, felt like a dream, but the memories were crystal clear in her mind. She pushed herself up to sit against the headboard, noticing how her body felt both heavy and light at the same time. Though physically tired, her heart was full of an inexplicable warmth. The faces of everyone she'd encountered yesterday drifted through her thoughts like beloved photographs in an album. There was Lillian Morrow, the frightened patient whose simple paperwork had seemed like an insurmountable mountain until Serafina had sat with her, explaining each form with patience and kindness. She remembered how Lillian's shoulders had gradually relaxed, how her trembling hands had steadied as they worked through the stack together. Marcus Delaney's face appeared next in her mind, not the tense, agitated expression he'd worn during that phone call, but the genuine look of relief and gratitude when she'd helped him find the missing file. Such a small thing, really, but it had changed the course of his entire day. Serafina smiled softly, remembering Vivian Porter's surprised expression when the situation had been resolved so easily. How many times did small frustrations build into larger conflicts simply because no one took the time to show a little compassion? And Eleanor, dear Eleanor Whitcomb, whose pain had been carried silently for so many years. Serafina's heart swelled with affection for the elderly widow who had finally found peace in forgiveness. I should write to them, Serafina whispered to herself. They should know what they meant to me. She pushed back the light blanket and made her way to her small writing desk by the window. The afternoon light made the wooden surface glow warmly, and she ran her fingers over it appreciatively. Opening the drawer, she pulled out her nicest stationery, cream-colored paper with a subtle floral pattern along the edges. Serafina picked up her favorite pen and began to write. Her first letter was to the hospital staff, to Vivian, to Marcus, to all the nurses and doctors who worked tirelessly to help others. Her handwriting flowed smoothly across the page as she expressed her gratitude for their dedication and commitment. Dear friends, she wrote, every day you touch lives in ways you might never realize. Your smallest kindnesses ripple outward, creating waves of healing that go far beyond medical care. Thank you for your hearts of service, for your patience in difficult moments, and for making our hospital truly a place of healing, not just for bodies, but for spirits too. She paused, watching a bird land on her windowsill. It tilted its head at her before flying away, and she smiled at the simple beauty of the moment before returning to her writing. The second letter was more personal, meant just for Eleanor. Serafina's pen moved more slowly now, choosing each word with careful consideration. Dear Eleanor, she began, yesterday you shared your story with me over tea, and in doing so, you taught me something precious about the power of forgiveness. Your willingness to open your heart, to share your pain and your regrets, showed more courage than you know. Please remember that you are loved, that you are worthy of forgiveness, and that your presence in this world matters more than you realize. Serafina continued writing, pouring out her heart onto the pages. She wrote about the strength she'd seen in Eleanor, about the beauty of second chances, and about the way Eleanor's vulnerability had touched her soul. She wrote about hope and healing, about the possibility of new beginnings that waited in every sunrise. As she wrote, tears gathered in her eyes, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of gratitude, of joy, of deep appreciation for the privilege of having known these people, of having been able to make even a small difference in their lives. The afternoon light shifted, growing softer as it moved across her desk. Serafina finished her letters, reading over each one carefully. She folded them with precise creases, sliding them into envelopes and addressing each one in her neat handwriting. Rising from her desk, she gathered the letters and walked to her small dining table. She arranged them carefully, making sure they were clearly visible and properly labeled. The envelope for Eleanor she placed slightly apart from the others, weighted down with a small stone she'd once found on a beach, a smooth white pebble that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Standing back, Serafina looked at the letters laid out on the table. They seemed to hold all the love and gratitude in her heart, waiting to be shared with those who had touched her life so deeply. The afternoon sun filtered through Serafina's bedroom window, casting a warm golden glow across her peaceful face. Her body felt heavy, like she was sinking into the softness of her mattress, but her mind remained clear and serene. The gentle tick-tock of her bedside clock marked each precious moment as it passed. She could feel it in every fibre of her being, the gradual weakening that spread through her limbs like a gentle tide. Her breathing had become shallow, but there was no pain, only a profound sense of completion. The letters she had written earlier lay neatly on her bedside table, their edges catching the sunlight. Serafina's thoughts drifted to the faces of those whose lives she had touched in the past day, Eleanor's tear-stained cheeks as forgiveness washed over her, Marcus's shoulders relaxing as tension melted away, and even Adrian's unexpectedly peaceful expression. Each memory felt like a small gift, precious and perfect. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for the small silver cross pendant that hung around her neck, a constant companion through the years. The metal felt cool against her fingers as she held it, drawing comfort from its familiar shape. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the quiet room. "Thank you for the gift of another day, for the chance to make things right." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sadness. She thought about how the universe had given her not just a second chance at life, but an opportunity to understand the true meaning of love. In choosing to stay and help others rather than run from her fate, she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. The afternoon light began to soften, and Serafina's body felt increasingly distant, as if she were floating. She could hear children playing in the park across the street, their laughter drifting up through her partially open window. The sound brought a gentle smile to her face, life continuing its beautiful dance. "Thank you for the privilege of helping others," she prayed, her words coming in soft whispers. "Thank you for showing me that love is stronger than fear, that kindness can change destinies, and that sometimes the greatest victory comes through surrender." Her mind wandered to Eleanor, imagining her recovery in the hospital, surrounded by caring medical staff. She thought of the pastry she'd left at Eleanor's door, a final act of kindness that would remind her neighbor she was loved and not alone. The room seemed to grow brighter, though the sun was actually lower in the sky. Serafina felt wrapped in a cocoon of peace, her breath becoming slower and more shallow. She thought about how she had spent her final hours writing those letters, pouring out her heart in gratitude to those who had touched her life. "I'm ready now," she whispered, feeling a profound sense of completion. There was no fear in her heart, only a deep acceptance and understanding. She had discovered that death was not an enemy to be fought, but sometimes a door through which love could work its greatest miracles. Her eyelids grew heavy, but her heart felt light. The sounds from outside, the rustling leaves, distant traffic, and children's voices began to fade into a peaceful hush. The warmth of the sun still caressed her face, like a tender goodbye kiss from the world she had served with such gentle determination. With her last conscious thoughts, Serafina sent up one final prayer of thanksgiving for the gift of life, for the chance to make a difference, and for the peace that now filled her heart. Her fingers relaxed their grip on the silver cross as her breathing became even softer. The room held its breath as Serafina's eyes gently closed, her features settling into an expression of perfect tranquility. In that quiet moment, as the afternoon light painted golden patterns on her walls, Serafina Brooks slipped away from this world as peacefully as a leaf floating on a gentle autumn breeze. The clock on her bedside table continued its steady rhythm, marking the moment when sacrifice and love had completed their perfect work. Outside, life went on. Children laughed, birds sang, and somewhere in a hospital room, an elderly woman was healing, unknowing of the precious gift she had been given. The afternoon sun streamed through the hallway windows as Eleanor Whitcomb slowly made her way up the apartment building stairs, one careful step at a time. Her hospital bag hung from her shoulder, lighter now, without the medical supplies she'd needed during her stay. Though her body still felt tender from the ordeal, the doctors had declared her recovery nothing short of miraculous. At the top of the stairs, Eleanor paused to catch her breath, leaning slightly against the wall. The familiar worn carpet and faded wallpaper of her floor brought comfort after days away. As she approached her apartment door, she noticed something peculiar. A small paper bag sitting neatly on her welcome mat, alongside a crisp white envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she unlocked her door. She picked up both items and carried them inside, setting her hospital bag down by the coat rack. The apartment felt different somehow, not quite the lonely space she'd left behind. A subtle warmth lingered in the air, as if someone's kindness had seeped into the very walls. In her small kitchen, Eleanor placed the paper bag on the counter and opened it carefully. Inside, she found 2 perfectly preserved pastries from her favorite local bakery, the one she rarely treated herself to anymore. The gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes as she remembered Serafina's gentle smile and caring presence. Eleanor sat down at her kitchen table, the envelope held delicately in her weathered hands. She traced her fingers over her name written on the front, recognizing Serafina's distinctive penmanship. With great care, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. "Dear Eleanor," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper in the quiet apartment. "By the time you read this, I will have already gone. Please know that every moment we shared was a gift I'll treasure eternally. When you told me about your son and the weight of regret you've carried all these years, I saw in you a heart so full of love that it had nowhere to go. You weren't a failure as a mother. You were human, doing your best with what you knew at the time. The tea we shared, the conversations we had, they meant more than you could know. You helped me understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing to bear another's burden. Your story gave me the courage to face what needed to be done. I want you to know that you are forgiven, truly and completely forgiven, not just by me, but by the universe itself. The love you have to give is still needed in this world. Please don't hide it away anymore. Share it with others who are hurting, just as you shared it with me. Those moments in the hospital when I held your hand, I felt your spirit fighting to stay. I knew then that your work here wasn't finished. There are still so many people who need the wisdom and compassion you have to give. Your life has purpose, Eleanor. It always has. The pastries are from Sophie's bakery. I remember you mentioning it was your favorite place years ago. Consider it my parting gift, a sweet reminder that joy can find us in the smallest moments when we're open to receiving it. Live fully, Eleanor. Love openly. Forgive yourself as I have forgiven you. Your heart has so much light to share with the world. With eternal gratitude and love, Serafina. Eleanor's hands shook as she lowered the letter to her lap. Tears fell freely down her cheeks, dropping onto the paper and creating small, perfect circles that spread like ripples on still water. The weight of Serafina's sacrifice pressed against her heart, a pressure both painful and precious. She understood now, with devastating clarity, what Serafina had done. The mysterious improvement in her condition, the peaceful feeling that had enveloped her during recovery, the knowing looks from the hospital staff when they spoke of her guardian angel. It all made sense. "Oh, Serafina," Eleanor whispered into the quiet apartment, her voice thick with emotion. "Sweet, brave Serafina." She pressed the letter to her chest, closing her eyes as grateful tears continued to fall. the afternoon light wrapped around her like a warm embrace, and for the first time in decades, Eleanor felt the hard shell of her guilt beginning to crack and fall away. In its place bloomed something new, a tender shoot of purpose, watered by Seraphina's sacrifice and love. Eleanor wept not just from grief, but from profound gratitude. The tears that fell were healing tears, washing away years of self-recrimination and isolation. In Seraphina's final gift, she had received not only forgiveness, but also a gentle nudge toward a new beginning, a chance to live the life of openness and love that Seraphina had seen possible for her all along. The pastries sat untouched on her counter, a sweet testament to thoughtfulness that transcended time and death itself. Through her tears, Eleanor smiled, feeling the weight of Seraphina's love settle around her shoulders like a mantle, not a burden, but a blessing she would carry forward with grace and purpose. A gentle autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Marcus Delaney stood outside the East Baltimore Youth Center. His security guard uniform was replaced by casual jeans and a soft blue sweater. He took a deep breath, remembering the day when a simple act of kindness had changed everything. The front desk volunteer smiled warmly as he entered. "You must be Marcus. We're so glad you're here." Marcus nodded, his usual stern expression softened by nervousness. The center bustled with activity. Kids doing homework, playing board games, and chatting with mentors. It reminded him of places he wished he'd had access to when he was younger. "I wasn't sure about coming," he admitted to the volunteer. "But something happened at the hospital a few weeks ago that made me think differently about a lot of things." As he spoke to the young people that afternoon, sharing his experience in security work and listening to their stories, Marcus felt the last traces of his old anger melting away. One boy reminded him of himself at that age, defensive, hurting, trying so hard to be tough. When the boy opened up about his struggles at home, Marcus remembered how Seraphina Brooks had diffused his own tension with such simple kindness. Across town, Adrian Cole sat in his parents' living room for the first time in 3 years. His mother's hands trembled as she poured tea, and his father's eyes were wet with unshed tears. "I kept thinking about what you said in your message," his father said quietly. "About feeling like you needed to come home." Adrian nodded, his throat tight. "Something changed in me recently. I can't explain it exactly. But this woman at work, she showed me kindness when I probably didn't deserve it. Made me realize I've been carrying around all this heaviness." His mother reached across and squeezed his hand. "We've missed you so much, Adrian." "I've missed you too," he whispered, letting the walls around his heart crumble just a little more. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Mount Auburn Cemetery as Eleanor Whitcomb made her way carefully between the headstones. Her recovered strength was a miracle, the doctors had said. But Eleanor knew it wasn't just a miracle. It was a gift, paid for at a price she was only beginning to understand. She found Seraphina's grave easily, having visited several times since the funeral. The simple marker bore Seraphina's name and the dates of her brief but meaningful life. Eleanor placed a bouquet of white roses against the stone. "You knew, didn't you?" Eleanor spoke softly, her voice carrying on the autumn air. "You knew what was happening that day? All those little kindnesses weren't random at all?" She thought about Marcus, who now volunteered with troubled youth instead of letting his frustration control him. She thought about Adrian, who had found his way back to his family after years of isolation. She thought about herself, not just alive, but truly living for the first time in decades. "You saved so many lives that day," Eleanor continued, touching the cool stone gently. "Not just mine. You saw the pain in people that nobody else noticed. You knew exactly what each of us needed. A pair of cardinals landed nearby, their bright red feathers stark against the green grass. Eleanor smiled, remembering how Serafina had once mentioned loving to watch the birds from her apartment window. "I found your letter," she said, her voice catching. "The one you left with those pastries. I didn't understand at first why you wrote about forgiveness and second chances, but I understand now. You chose to give your life so that others could heal." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the sweet scent of autumn leaves. Eleanor pulled her cardigan closer around her shoulders. "The hospital staff still talks about you, about your gentleness, your smile. They say the whole atmosphere of the place changed that day. People are kinder now, more patient with each other. It's like you started a chain reaction of compassion that keeps growing." Eleanor reached out and traced the letters of Serafina's name on the stone. "I want you to know that your sacrifice wasn't wasted. Adrian reconciled with his family last week. I saw them having dinner together at that little cafe on Charles Street. And Marcus, he's working with troubled teenagers now, showing them there's a better way than anger." Tears rolled freely down Eleanor's cheeks now, but they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. "As for me, I finally called my son. We talked for hours, really talked for the first time in 20 years. He's coming to visit next month." The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Eleanor stood slowly, her hand resting one last time on the headstone. Her voice was barely a whisper as she spoke the blessing that had been growing in her heart. "May your soul know the peace you brought to others. May your light continue to shine in the lives you touched. May your love keep spreading like ripples in a pond, touching life after life with healing. And may God hold you in perfect joy until we meet again." She stood for a moment longer, watching as the cardinals took flight together into the evening sky. Then she turned and walked slowly back through the cemetery, carrying Serafina's legacy of love in her heart. 5 years had passed since that transformative day. Eleanor Whitcomb sat in her favorite armchair by the window, afternoon sunlight warming her shoulders as she poured tea for her young visitor. The china cups clinked softly against their saucers. "More sugar?" Eleanor asked, studying the tired face of Hazel Monroe, a nurse who had started visiting her after providing care during a recent minor surgery. Hazel shook her head, her shoulders slumped. "No, thank you. I'm just—" She paused, running a finger along the rim of her cup. "I'm thinking about quitting nursing. Everything feels so hopeless sometimes, like nothing we do really matters in the end." Eleanor set down the teapot carefully. "Would you like to hear a story about someone who changed my life? Someone who showed me that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples we never imagine?" Hazel looked up, curiosity flickering in her weary eyes. "Was it another nurse?" "Yes." Eleanor smiled, reaching for a small, framed photograph on the side table. Her name was Serafina Brooks. Eleanor's voice grew soft with memory as she handed the photo to Hazel. It showed a woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile, wearing hospital scrubs. 5 years ago, I was a very different person. Lonely, filled with regret about my son, convinced I deserved to be alone. She described that first day when Serafina had helped her with dropped groceries, the simple act of kindness that led to tea and conversation. She listened without judgment. Eleanor explained, and showed me that forgiveness was possible, even self-forgiveness. Hazel leaned forward as Eleanor continued, describing the night she collapsed and Serafina's unwavering presence at the hospital. I didn't know then what she knew, that she was trading her life for mine. She had been given a second chance at life, and she used it to save not just me, but others too. Eleanor told Hazel about Marcus Delaney, the security guard whose anger Serafina had diffused with simple compassion, and Adrian Cole, whose path she had quietly altered through small acts of kindness. She understood something profound. Eleanor said, that healing one person's heart can prevent pain from spreading to others. Heisel's eyes had grown wide. But how do you know all this about her second chance? Eleanor reached into a drawer and carefully withdrew a letter, its paper soft from years of handling. She wrote this to me before she died. She knew what was coming and accepted it with grace. She chose to give her life so others could heal. As Eleanor shared more details of Serafina's final day, the pastries left at doors, the letters of gratitude, the peaceful acceptance, tears began rolling down Hazel's cheeks. The miracle wasn't just that she saved lives. Eleanor continued gently. It's what happened afterward. Marcus now runs youth programs, helping troubled teens find better paths. Adrian reconciled with his family and works in addiction counseling. And me? She smiled. I finally reached out to my son. We're rebuilding our relationship, one small step at a time. Hazel wiped her eyes. But how? How did she find the strength to make that choice? Love. Eleanor said simply. She understood that love is stronger than fear, stronger even than death. Every small kindness you show, every moment you spend truly seeing another person's pain, it matters. It creates change we may never witness ourselves. Eleanor watched as Hazel studied the photograph again, seeing how the young nurse's posture had straightened, how the light had returned to her eyes. Thank you, Hazel whispered. I needed to hear this today. Sometimes we forget why we chose this path in the first place. Eleanor patted Hazel's hand and glanced at Serafina's photograph. The late afternoon sun caught the glass, making her smile seem to glow. That's why I share her story, Eleanor said softly. Because love like that doesn't end with death. It lives on in every person it touches, in every life it changes. She saw in Hazel's transformed expression the same renewal she had witnessed in so many others who heard Serafina's story. The young nurse's cynicism had melted away, replaced by something stronger, hope, purpose, and understanding of the profound impact small acts of compassion could have. Eleanor smiled gently at the photograph of Serafina, feeling the familiar wave of gratitude wash over her. In the quiet moment, she could almost hear Serafina's voice reminding her that love was the greatest force for healing in the world. She knew, with absolute certainty, that as long as people continued sharing this story of sacrificial love and everyday kindness, Serafina's gift would keep touching lives, creating ripples of healing that would extend far beyond anything she could have imagined. Thanks for watching, if any. Part of this story lingered with you. Consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.